Welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Jeff. How's it going, man?
Good. Great to be here, man.
It's good to have you on. So yeah, just got you from Pod Match, like most of the people I've been interviewing lately. But yeah, if you could, I guess just explain to people what you've done and who you are, and I guess how you got started doing it.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Seckendorf, and I started my career as a filmmaker many, many years ago. First as a still photographer, then as a filmmaker. And film industry is such a crazy place to be because, for the most part, most people in the film industry's full-time job is looking for work, and their part-time job is working. And so that's how I was, and it was driving me crazy. So I had a producing partner tell me once that she thought I spent 15 years trying to get into the film business and then 15 years trying to get out. And so on that out trajectory, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to start a scuba certification and training agency. Do you want to help?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, that seems like a good way out of the film business." So back in 2008, I started Unified Team Diving, global scuba certification and training agency, as far away from the film business as I could get, I thought. But of course, I was still making content, stuff like that. And I've been running that since, doing it every day. It's an awesome company. And then I've done a few other things throughout the course of my life. I spent a long time as a flight instructor and an aerobatic competition pilot. Spent a lot of time outdoors. I raced on cross-country skis. I've climbed big mountains. I was an ice climber, triathlete, and which leads me kind of to where I am now, aside from the scuba thing, is that on my 60th birthday, I decided to stop running competitively. I looked around and it's like, that guy's got a bad hip, that guy's got a bad knee, that guy's got a bad brain, that guy's got I don't know what, but I didn't want to be that guy. So I stopped triathlons, I stopped running, and I got very involved in racing on the track, on the velodrome. And that led to, this past 8 or 9 years of focusing on track racing and time trials. And now I'm training to try to set a either US or international hour record on the bike, which is how far can you ride your bike in an hour.
Mm.
It's crazy. So that's what I'm working on.
So usually when I let people just rant about whatever at the beginning, I usually try to, let's say let's go back, we'll go
Yeah,
back
yeah,
to the
yeah.
first thing. But I do want to pick on something that you mentioned of like kind of why you stopped running. And that's something that's so crazy about the human body. It's like if you don't abuse it, it can't get used to something. So like if you for somebody who works out all the time, they're probably not going to get sore from a small workout. But somebody who never works out, they do a small workout, they're going to be really sore. You realize I have been running. A lot of people say run, you should be running, you should be exercising, but like we've noticed and we have a large sample size of runners who are injured, who
Yeah.
have all these pains. And it's crazy because you think, oh, if I run, my body will get used to it because literally, the bones are being fractured and repairing and we have denser bone marrow from being able to do these exercises. They say weightlifting does the same thing to your muscles and your bones, and it allows your bones to be more dense, and that's good. That's healthy for you. But ironically, the more you do it, the more likely you are to get injured at an older age because you're just constantly impacting your body. So that was smart of you to have that realization, but also how does it make you feel knowing knowing that now at your age, even though you do seem very healthy, obviously you want to do this hour bike ride, but how do you feel about that decision and looking at other people's decision to continue to do what they're doing at an older age?
Yeah. Well, and in that question, there's quite a bit to unpack also. So, my 12-year-old grandson is getting ready to start playing football. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah, right?
I don't know. I mean, I just did my 50th high school reunion, and all of my friends who played football in high school are limping. Um, so yeah, no, I think in a lot of ways, you're absolutely right, Jackson. I think it, running, like when we became bipeds, a bit, I don't know how many millions of years ago, whatever it was, when people started walking instead of crawling on fours, we really weren't designed to run. I mean, we have this thinking brain and we have this weird aerobic system that, we could hunt, with a rock and a spear by walking all day and wear out the animals who would just, fall over at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the heat. Then you walk up to them and eat them. So, I don't think we were really ever designed to run. And running became or for long periods of time,
Hmm.
marathons and things like that. So, but for me, it was really about just really wanting to take care of the body that I have and understanding the physiology, understanding how adaptation works, which is exactly what you mentioned, which is, when you lift weights or when you do some exercise, you actually injure the muscles in this sort of microscopic way. And then when they heal stronger. Adaptation. It's a very simple process. And I'm in the gym and I do this. And, as you said, I'm at a point now where I rarely get sore the next day after a hard bike ride or a hard gym session because I'm used to it. But running, man, it just seems like it's impactful in a bad way. Just my personal feeling. I I think it's impactful in a bad way. So, I don't judge or encourage anybody. The athletes I coach, I try to push them onto the bike and in the pool and in the gym. Um, and walking. I think walking is awesome. But yeah.
I'm curious on your take on running compared to climbing in the way that you have climbed. I mean, you just said walking, you encourage the walking, but the climbing itself, um, I I think that people who like solo climb, like free climbing, are aliens. Like people who can do that kind of stuff. That's so impressive. I don't know if you know who Larry Wheels is, but
I
him and
don't.
this other guy, dang, Juju Mufu or something like that. They're like social media, like bodybuilder type people or strongmen, whatever. But they were working out with this guy who is a free climber. I think he's just one of the best climbers there is, but he's probably half their size, and he was doing pretty much the same weight that they were doing on their workouts. And Larry is like 6 foot 200 and something pound, like well, probably well over 250, and like can bench a house, squat everything, deadlift everything. And this free climber was half their size, doing just about the same weight and the same speed as they were doing. Like they'd go slow, he could go slow right with them. So like the ability of doing these multi-functionalities, you said you encourage people to walk or get on the bike or swim, climbing, like these things, even if it's just hiking, climbing, but like these things that are well-rounded type multifunctional things are, I think, are way better for your health than just sticking with one thing like being a bodybuilder or something like that, because the human body, I think, is meant to move and to adventure in my opinion.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I have been a gym rat forever. And I've been through the whole realm of different kinds of training and different systems and all of this. And, started on machines, which I then found out was really not the best way to um, build any kind of functional strength because it's too isolating. So of course, then I moved to free weights and I got a this trainer who I really liked and worked with for a decade. And we were working toward heavy free weights, deadlifts, squats, you know, uh, bench, all the normal stuff, and trying to isolate the weights while knowing that with a free weight as opposed to a machine, while you try to isolate, you're still using stabilizing muscles to keep the weight under control. And so it's more than just a bicep curl like on a machine, because you've got every part of your upper body engaged a tiny bit. So I recently discovered a system designed by a guy named Paul Chek at the Chek Institute. And he has this system of functional strength training, among other things. And so I hunted down a Czech Institute practitioner or personal trainer here in San Diego. And this has been life-changing for me after 50 years in the gym, maybe longer. So the idea now is when I train with this guy, we're doing 8 exercises combined into one functional movement. So it might be a lunge with a cable pull and a twist, and then reset, and a lunge with a cable pull and a twist, and then reverse that other side, things like that. So you're engaging many, many multiple systems in the same single exercise. And it has been phenomenal for me for uh, creating what I consider to be functional strength, which is the strength I need to get up in the morning and go cook breakfast, and go pump up my bicycle tires so I can get on the bike and ride fast. So this whole idea, especially as I've aged up, right? I'm turning 69 in a month or so. As I've aged up, it seemed even more important. So that's one thing. The other thing I've done in weights that I think is in kind of in combination with working with this Czech system, and it's CHEK, is that I kind of made this self-coaching concept that I can get 95% of the benefit of weightlifting if I lift 90% of my max in any given moment. So I rarely get to 1 rep max weights, and I'm usually very far away from that because, again, injury prevention at any age, but particularly as we age up, is so critical that if I get 95% of the benefit of a workout and I do lighter weights, I mean, and lighter, I'm not talking about like feather weights, but, reducing, going into 70 or 80% of 1 rep max. I just feel like that trade-off of not getting 100% of the benefit of squatting 400 pounds and versus, the 95% benefit of squatting something that I can actually manage for 6 or 8 reps and not feel like I'm completely smoked. That trade-off to protection of injury seems really powerful to me. So I've given up, I think, a little bit of the benefit of extreme weightlifting directly to my sport of cycling, in exchange for knowing that if I'm injured, I can't do anything. So that's just me. I mean, I don't know if that's a common thread among functional weightlifters or not, but to me, I feel so much better when I go into the gym knowing that, my chance of injury is very, very low, and my chance of maximum benefit is a little lower than had I gone all out.
Yeah,
I don't know. Does that make sense what I just kind of said?
to me it does. I did a podcast with a guy, I think his name is Roman Fisher, but when we were talking, I said that my number one suggestion for people who are going to work out or like start working out would be, one would be bodybuilding, and then two would be kettlebells. Because, oh, I'm sorry, it actually wasn't Roman, it was another guy. But anyways, um so I say those two things because, one, bodybuilding will make you look good, and you can isolate the muscles to start there to know what a muscle should feel like if it's fatiguing, and then two, kettlebells, because the functionality.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to just tell somebody just do this kettlebell workout. You kind of have to explain it to them because they're probably going to get it wrong just by them just like doing it. Like, if you take a guy who's only done bodybuilding his whole life and he's got these big muscles and you put him through a kettlebell workout, you might struggle because he's not used to the weight being distributed through his body and having to functionally move in a certain way. So that's why I suggest those two. Um,
It's just to look at that for 1 second. Kettlebells are fascinating to me, and the injury potential on kettlebells is super high because we're swinging them a lot. And
correct.
that last rep where you eccentrically try to slow down the swinging part, always seemed like, oh my God, that's the one we have to be careful of. So if I'm doing, 10 kettlebell swings, I kind of look at it like 12,
Mm.
right? And the last two are just very slowly decelerating that thing, because if you try to stop it, there you go. Back in the whole idea. Can we get injured? Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that my wife heard. She's a personal trainer, and that's something that she heard and like abuses me with this terminology. And it's make sure you do whatever reps you're doing or sets. Make sure you have two left in the tank, is what she always
Yeah.
says. Make sure you have
That's a
two
good way
left.
to do it. That's
But
a good way to do it.
but yeah, that's why I say those two types of exercises, and mainly lean toward the kettlebell because it's it teaches you how to actually use your body and how to distribute weight. And I brought this up about, it was an old commercial or something on YouTube where it was an older man and he kept lifting weights, and he was lifting a kettlebell and he kept picking it up from the ground and putting it on a shelf or something like that. And it turned out the reason why he was doing all this training, and is like his wife is watching him train, the reason why he was doing all that is because I guess his grandson, he had a baby that he was training to pick up and help him put the star on top of the Christmas tree around Christmas time. And so I was like, that's beautiful. That
Yeah.
teaches everybody
Yeah.
of all ages on the importance of the functionality of just a kettlebell, just it being on the ground and you having to pick it up and lift it is comparable to having to pick up your grandchild, your great grandchild, whoever, and being able to play with them, because that's what we all want in life is happiness with family and friends and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's my take on the weight. The heaviness of the weight is kind of irrelevant. Can you just move weight? Can you move your body over a long period of time?
And why are we in the gym,
Yeah.
right? That's the other big question. I mean, I have a really good friend who I used to ride a bike with, who was a gym rat, and he has faded off the bike because he loves the gym. He just that's his sport. He just loves, and he's not bodybuilding. He's just, lifting weights because he loves it. To me, it's a means to an end, right? It's a means to longevity. It's a means to injury prevention. It's a means to being stronger and faster on a bicycle. It's a means to playing with my grandkids and tossing them around. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. But I really, whenever I talk to athletes about who I'm working with, who are interested in getting in the gym, it's like, why? That's my first question, is why? Do you want to look better? Do you want to feel better? Do you want to live longer? Do you want to be better in your sport? Do you want to do injury prevention, or you just want to like put on a thong, take off your shirt, and stand up in an audience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another, like, me and my wife were actually just talking about CrossFit because some chick, she was preaching about how many injuries that she had after doing CrossFit. And I think CrossFit is phenomenal for athletes. Like, if you already are an athlete, I think CrossFit is phenomenal. But we have seen an uptick, or at least the media has spread an uptick of injuries because of CrossFit. And I think that whether it is or isn't because of CrossFit, I do think you need to have some sort of knowledge and foundation for a while before you get hardcore into CrossFit, because it is a sport. It was built on being a sport.
Yeah.
So if you don't have at least those foundational um, ideologies or even like strength and stuff like that from just using kettlebells or doing Olympic lifts or even the bodybuilding aspect of it, then you probably are going to be prone to being injured. Like, you can't just, like, they incorporate swimming and biking into CrossFit. Is basically like a triathlon, but you you kind of need to be able to have some sort of athleticness to even be able to begin to do those things. Like, I do more of a bodybuilding style workout, and I do use kettlebells as well, but like, I'm not about to jump on a bike and do it. Like, I'm 31 and I know right now I wouldn't be able to keep up with you because I haven't been doing the
Well,
things that you're
yeah,
doing.
I'm fast, but you know, I train people on the bike. I coach people who are cyclists, and we could take you, strong, fit, active, gym, all that, And, I can put you on the bike and say, get in a big gear and pedal up a hill and you'll explode your knees,
Mm.
right? You just can't jump into things like this. And the gym is prime, you know, January 5th in the gym, right after Christmas, when the week's over and everybody got their Christmas gym membership. And, uh, it's like the Lycra injuries are out,
Mm.
you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the thing is, right. It's just, you have to go slow. You've got to get a coach. You've got to figure out why you're doing this. What's the end goal? And then go on from there. And then I think it's super fun. I mean, I love being in the gym, but you know, there's a means to an end for me. I wouldn't do it if I probably didn't have that end in sight.
I do want to get back to, your hour biking, but let's go back, as I said earlier, let's go back to the photography and film. So I actually do I have a company called Damage Media Group where I create content for businesses. And so I do photography, I do videography. So I'm interested in what it was like. So when did you start? Like what age were you?
6.
6.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
6. My uncle, my dad's brother, gave me a Hawkeye Brownie camera.
I was
I
gonna
was
ask
6.
like
Yeah,
what.
yeah. So this would have been 1961, right? That
Mhm.
goes back a little bit. And I got a roll of film and I started taking pictures. And then by 8 or so or 9, we had put a little darkroom in the house. And I was developing film and contact printing pictures. And so that led to a career in photography. And I ended up on newspapers.
Mm.
So all through high school and into my earlier days, uh, I was working for local newspapers. I ended up working for wire services, freelancing for all the big outlets, New York Times, Newsday, Newsweek, all that kind of stuff, as a stills photographer. Did a lot of sports and a lot of politics because I lived in upstate New York and in Albany, in the capital of New York. So we had politics. We were close to Washington. Had covered the Buffalo Bills, Cooperstown Hall of Fame, Watkins Glen Grand Prix when that was out there, um, and then I took a job at a TV station as a cameraman. That was one of my sillier moments, but I learned how to manage photo. I was a good photographer. I learned how to actually turn it into moving photography and
Mm.
video. Back when the gear weighed like 100 pounds. But I learned how to shoot and then learned how to edit and do some audio and things like that. And then I moved that into a freelance career in video. And then one of those video clients said to me, "Hey, can you shoot this little commercial on film?"
Mm.
And of course, I had a still photography background. I had a video background. I didn't know how to put the two together.
Mm.
So, of course, always say yes, right? Just always say yes. So yeah, of course, sure. And then I was like, what the hell? And so now I've got this commercial booked and I didn't know what to do. So I found a camera assistant, an assistant cameraman. And I just like got him in like those guides that used to be out of like graphic designers and photographers and all the local things. So I just opened up one of those local guides and I said, camera assistant. And I said, I got to do this thing. I don't know what to do. And
Mm.
he said, well, I will uh, rent the camera for you, get it all organized, check it out, put the film in it, put it on the tripod, point it for you, turn it on, and focus it. All you have to do is tell me what the exposure is and point it. And
Mm.
I'm like, oh, I might like this job. And so my first job in the film industry was director of photography. I didn't come through the ranks or anything like that. And and it was a great start. It was a great experience. It worked out really well. I remember the commercial like it was yesterday, and it was in the 80s, early 80s. And so I went on to have a career in commercials of about 1,000 or so commercials that I shot and directed over the decades.
Wow.
And then when I started getting bored with that, I kind of wormed my way into some short films and then some TV movies and then some feature films. Um, but I didn't like the months away from home.
Mm.
So I kind of struggled through that, moved to the West Coast, struggled more through it because of the travel and things like that, and eventually exited to do scuba.
So
Um,
what was it like just going through I would assume the equipment changed somewhat frequently, not too quick, because like now equipment is changing 2 years. Like every 2 years, there's just a huge jump in equipment. But maybe not back then. Could you enlighten me on?
so I shot motion picture film for the first 20 or 30 years of my film career, right? And the cameras were the same. I mean, there were little things and changes and stuff that, made some shots easier, and they got a little lighter, and but not much. So we would just buy motion picture film. And if you wanted to change what the image looked like, you would just put different film in the same camera.
Mm,
And then digital, raw digital motion capture came along with a camera system called the Red. I
mm,
don't know if you recall this, the Red One,
mm.
and that was later followed by the an Arri and Panavision digital version. But I shot the first kind of giant production in LA on the Red. It was the live action footage for a video game called Need for Speed.
Oh,
And they had called up and said, "Hey, we want to, we got hired. There was a director, producer, and then me as the cinematographer. And they just wanted regular, at that point, high definition video. And it was all going to get processed and mucked with and changed around. And I was like, well, there's this new camera system and we could do 4K. And, you know, I know where there's three of these. And they were like, oh, that'd be interesting. And it was a whole Megillah, right? It had like, you know, digital technicians to manage the data. And we were recording to these cards that held like 10 minutes and blah, blah, blah. But the cool thing about that is when you're recording digital capture in what's called raw format, then the camera is the negative.
mm,
You can't change it. Whatever is on the camera is the negative. So for me, it was a very simple transition from shooting motion picture film with a light meter to shooting digital capture in a raw format where that emulsion in the motion picture film was really the recording sensors in the camera. So it wasn't until video became more prevalent for this and we started shooting not raw, where you can actually manipulate the image in the camera, that everything changed.
mm.
Early 90s, everything changed. And then now you're buying a camera with like 100 or 1,000 different looks in it, as opposed to shooting either motion picture film, which has a look based on, filters and things like that, or the raw capture, which is the same as a motion picture emulsion. So it all kind of, I don't know if I'm diverging too much, but it all kind of changed throughout the 90s. And now I've got, a little tiny Sony pocket sitting right here, a little Sony pocket camera the size of a cell phone, and it does so much,
Mm.
and it does so much.
You have like the was it like a 6600 or 6700?
No, 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 no. Are we on video or just audio?
Yeah, we're doing video.
Okay, here it is. I got this little Sony, I don't know, XA1, X1. I don't know what it is. It's like this
Okay.
little tiny thing. It's got a little fuzzy thing on top for the microphone. I've been using this,
Hmm.
and it's amazing, right? Does raw, does high def, does still, it's like, $300, $400.
I will
So,
say people your age who have seen like the transition of equipment probably value these little nuances, like things that these companies are coming out with that people who are probably my age are like, what's that? That thing, what it's not doing stuff that like, as you were talking about, like the red, it doesn't do like what the red, but it's like, do you see what this like people your
I
age
know.
really value like smartphones way more than people my age because you're like, look at all the things this thing.
Yeah, I know, but the red did nothing. The red, I shouldn't say it. The red did only one thing, right?
Yeah.
Only thing the red camera did was record like an emulsion, like a film emulsion. It was
Mm.
amazing. couldn't change the color temperature by putting different film in. You couldn't change the ISO by putting different. It was like one thing.
Mm.
It was really clever. So yeah, so one of the things that's happened, and again, this happened through the 2000s and into now, is that filmmaking became a game of equipment. And I really believe it lost sight of the most critical element of filmmaking, which is, of course, the story.
Mm.
So, it used to be even film schools, right? When film schools were shooting on, the students were shooting on 16 mm film, they might have 6,000 feet of film to make a 10-minute movie.
Hmm.
Well, now I've got like 60,000 feet of film in my little Sony camera.
Yeah.
So I saw this very funny graphic one day of for still cameras of a 4x5 uh, sheet film stills camera, right? And it showed you the film holder. It's like two pieces of film, one good shot. And then it showed you like like a Hasselblad, 12
Mm.
exposures, one good shot. Then it showed you like a 35 mm camera and said 36 exposures, one good shot. And then it showed you a digital camera and said 40,000 images, one good shot. And I
That,
think that's
yeah.
not so far off the mark, right? Because I mean, people are making crap because they can get the equipment.
Mm.
And people are not focusing on story. They're not focusing on um, development. You look at a short film, there is so much one-note stuff coming out now. This is me sound like an old freaking curmudgeon or something, but which I'm not. But it's like, write a good story and then figure out what it is you need to get that story on the screen,
Mm.
as opposed to figure out what you need to get a story on the screen and then try to shove some script into that model.
Mm.
So I get off on a huge rant on this stuff because, even movies now, we're looking at movies, you know, there's so much stuff on Netflix and Prime and all this other stuff that, if I'm sitting around here at night and I've got nothing going on, you know, it's like, my wife and I are like, let's just find a movie. And, you find this stuff and there's like endless content,
Mm.
but it's so hard to find something that engages me with proper story development, character development, and something that speaks to me and I get some learning from, or I get some introspection from. I've lost all sight of that. Did you watch the commercials in the Super Bowl this year?
I watched some of them, and they're nowhere near as good as they used to be.
No, no, because I think we're back on gags and effects and equipment. We're off of story.
Yeah.
Those stories, here I am again, old curmudgeon. It's like the stories 15, 10, 15, 20 years ago in the Super Bowl were so cool. I
Mm.
mean, Super Bowl was like, people watched it for these amazing, amazing stories. And what we had this year was a pretty good football game and like the same commercials you'd see watching, I don't know, Gilligan's Island or something. I don't. So I think we're losing that. And I think that if storytelling is a thing that interests you in any form, book, audio, visual, then get the story first. Figure out your story. What do you want to say? What is your purpose in telling somebody your story, and then tell it, and get the people around you who will help you tell it in the best possible way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the music industry and I see that as well in music. I feel like music, I do a lot of rap music and it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. Like rap music, I I don't even listen to most of the new rappers who come out now because I'm so used to people like Nas and Wu-Tang Clan and like all these older hip hop heads because they actually talked about substance. Like a lot of Nas stuff was like a lot of uplifting and like educated rap music. But like nowadays, like nobody really talks about good content in the rap music. So I'm just like, this is horrible. This
Well, I
music.
love the history of it, right? I mean, it was a
Yeah.
rant,
Yeah, yeah.
right? It was a rant, and I love a good rant. Um, and so there's something to that, I mean, sometimes I just want to be, a little white boy rapper because I can do my rants and maybe someone else will listen who doesn't expect it on a podcast or something. I don't know. It's fun. But no, I think so. And I think again, it's, you know, because the equipment has become so accessible, right? You can record this stuff with like my little podcast mic and a cell phone,
Hmm.
you know, that uh, and I reached a new low with it a couple of weeks ago, right? So in the scuba company, we have a podcast that we've been doing for years, and a couple of years ago, I started doing these things called car casts, which are kind of scuba related, but they're just my musings about coaching and process and all the stuff kind of peripheral to scuba, but more about life. So I've been doing them in the car. And I have tried every single thing I can do to record these things in the car. And I reached a new low the other day when I recorded one with some Bluetooth headset. You could barely understand it because I want to do them spontaneously. But the audio is horrible. I thought the substance was good, the content was good. So I published it. And then I was like, okay, this is the lowest of the low for quality. I can't do this anymore. So now I figured out a whole system, and I have to take a recorder with me and a microphone and do it properly. And the last one I did sounds great. But, uh, even, me going back, 40 years as a filmmaker, I've still gotten sucked into the trap that content with crappy production value is okay.
Hmm.
And then I realized that it's really not. But I had to get to that low to realize that, okay, I can't do this anymore, or people are going to stop listening. So that's the same thing I think with a camera. I mean, I could go make a movie with my little white Sony thing here, um, just as effectively as anybody else, I think, because I'm a good storyteller.
Yeah, and that's something I did notice. I don't know if you remember or if you used Netflix like when it first started, but they used to have like ratings. Like they would rate, it would be like a
Yeah.
one star movie, 3-star movie, stuff like that.
And then you
And
get the DVD in the mail.
yeah. Yeah. So like something I did another podcast with a guy who has done movies. He was a director, and he was telling me, he was like, I don't know if you noticed, but you can only submit to Netflix if you use certain equipment. They only accept movies with like using like Ari Alexa cameras, Red cameras, like all these top-notch cameras. You have to use the equipment that they approve of, or else, they don't accept it. And I was like, I never noticed how similar a lot of Netflix shows and movies look. It's because they're all using like the same quality of equipment. And that's equipment focused. That's not story or content focused. They're not, you could have the greatest movie ever, but if you filmed it on the wrong camera, the Netflix is like, well, this isn't good quality, so we're not going to use this. That's crazy to think. If you can film something on a phone and it looks phenomenal, I'll take it. Like
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think part of it is to cut out some of the massive amount of content that would get submitted. But I mean, I've done big production 35 millimeter motion pictures with Super 8 elements
mm,
and video elements and 16 millimeter elements for a look. But we have a baseline of where the thing starts, and then that creates the contrast of a different, part of the movie or different part of the story. So there's that. But yeah, I think that, it's hire the best people you can, surround yourself with people who know more than you, and stay focused. Even if you're trying to make a movie with your cell phone, do it with people who know what they're doing, who
mm.
know how to do good audio, know how to do good lighting, and tell your story in the best possible way. There was again, going back to the 80s, there was a genre of filmmaking called dogma. Do you recall this?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure what it is.
So dogma was basically ethnographic narrative storytelling,
Mm.
where you would go into locations with a camera and a microphone, and that's it. You couldn't change anything. You couldn't dress the sets. You had a script and actors, but you couldn't, it was just completely what's in front of you. And I was always fascinated by this because there were amazing dogma films and really crappy ones. And the amazing ones are the ones that took advantage of, you know, the rules, doing air quotes, the rules of dogma, which is don't touch anything, don't redress a set, don't add lights. So I never got to this point, but I always wanted to make a dogma film where I could shoot like a like say you have a 12-page scene, which would normally take you 3 days to shoot. To be able to shoot that from 8 in the morning till 10 in the morning in this location for 4 days,
Mm,
right? So it's consistent in that thing, and then outthink the process of dogma without the equipment, without the lights, without anything, and then move to another location where all of a sudden you've got, windows that face west and you've got the light coming in this way and shoot that for 3 hours.
mm,
Uh, I did a movie up in the coast of Maine once, way up high, where the tides were like 12 feet. So we would go from no beach to like 200 feet of beach over the course of 6 hours. And we ended up having to use the same technique sometimes to break a scene down and shoot it, over the course of 3, 4, 5, 6 days, because we had to have the beach in a certain condition of exposure from the tides. And it was a really interesting thought process that I learned kind of exploring this dogma. Um, I think it was it called Dogma 85? Was that what it was?
I'm not sure.
I'll have to
I
look
just
and
remember
but
dog.
yeah, but there's some really interesting films. Some of them were really dark. Um,
And it's something that somebody else brought up to me that I never realized was like horror and like thrillers and stuff like that are usually in like two locations and that's it. Like the
yeah,
whole thing, like a haunted house is in that house.
yeah,
If there is some killer on the loose, there's usually everybody's trapped in this house and they can't get away. And I'm just like, I never realized that. Like all
yeah,
these stories have like one or two locations and then that's it.
yeah. Because
Crazy.
you can shoot 12 pages a day,
Yeah.
you know, instead of 3 or 2 or whatever a normal movie would shoot. Yeah, no, it's crazy. There's all sorts of ways to play that, to play this to your advantage, and that's kind of what you're doing if you have a decent script. Keeps
Yeah.
coming back to that. Got to
Yeah.
have a story.
What you were talking about earlier is my immediate first thought was I think dialogue is almost getting worse. Like, I don't know if it's because, and like you said, the
Mhm.
equipment is more accessible, which how I feel about music. I feel like since everybody can just go buy the equipment, they're just like talking at the top of their head, which is
Yeah,
another topic on rap music. They say
yeah,
like Jay-Z really started the um, freestyling where you just like rap off the top of your head and then the engineer just hits record. You couldn't do that back in the day because you had tape and you
yeah.
had to record the tape. And if you ran out of tape, your session was basically over. But
Yeah,
nowadays they can just hit record and you don't like it, you delete it and you just start a new take. And
it's like that camera thing, right? 2 good shots, 12 good shots, 36 good shots, or 40,000 shots.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's how dialogue and movie content has become is it's so easy to just make it that they're like, "Ah, this is good enough to make this movie." And it's like, "Ah, but yeah, but not that many people are gonna like it. So let's make the best we
yeah.
can."
So that's a wonderful segue into something else I want to talk about, which is purpose.
Hmm.
Um, I started this little project called the Institute of Purpose. And I just loved the name. I was having coffee with a friend of mine. He said, I've got this name. I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, what is it? He said, it's the Institute of Purpose. And I just thought that was maybe the best name for any company I've ever heard in my whole life. And it's like, okay, we have to do it. And then we didn't know what it was. I mean, the joke is like, you have a name for a high school band, but you don't know what kind of music you're playing. And you don't
Hmm.
have a drummer or any of that. So we had this name and we slowly developed this into a website, which is housing content by people talking about their purpose,
Hmm.
why they're getting up in the morning. The segue from storytelling and filmmaking is the best filmmakers or the best authors have something to say. And that something is part of their purpose. I mean, I know filmmakers and I know authors who are just who just can't wait to get their thoughts out, and that is what they live for. And so, in the course of good filmmaking, which starts with a good story, we're looking at why are people making these movies? Or why are people making shorts? Is it just to become an influencer and try to make $1 million off YouTube? Or do you really have something to say that sort of defines, why you wake up in the morning?
Mm.
And that's what we're doing with the Institute of Purpose. And I think it's really fascinating. So I've got, I don't know how many little short 40-second videos, and you're welcome to do one if you like, uh, about what is your purpose? Why do you wake up in the morning? What is it that you do that makes you feel like there's a reason for you to be alive?
Mm.
And so it's so interesting, Jackson, because out of all of these little videos I've done, both, very short and kind of in medium length, 2 to 10 minutes, the common thread throughout all of it is my purpose is to serve others. My purpose is to help others. And it's fascinating that I have um, coaches, business people, athletes, musicians, all this whole range of people. And basically it all comes down to the same thing for each and every one of them. So when you get to the end of these little 40 or 50-second videos, it's like, and so I guess my purpose is to help other people.
Mm.
And it's interesting. And I think that if we looked at, since we're, focused on storytelling, if we look at storytelling and say, what is your reason for telling a story? Right? Are you telling a story for yourself? Or are you telling a story to serve others? We see this with instructors in every possible field, right? Scuba, I've done it in flying, now as a cycling coach. And you can teach because your ego says, I need to stand up and tell 50 people what I know. Or you can teach because you just love the aha moment that happens when you see one person's eyes light up and said, oh my God, I get that. And now I can take and run with that. And so I think that, when we look at all of these things we've talked about today, you can say, well, what is the purpose to do any of this? What is the purpose you know, to be a modern rap singer and not have a story to tell?
Mm.
Whereas the earlier generation of the music, that genre of music you're talking about, it was only about story. Even in the battles, it was like, you. It's like, my purpose is to diss you,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then my secondary purpose is to stand here and get dissed, you know?
Mm.
So that kind of stuff, it's like, what are you doing in this whole process of creating content, of having ideas on teaching, on anything around your life that causes you to wake up in the morning? Why do you do it? I don't know. I try to ask that not as a rhetorical question. It's like, why do we do it?
Mm.
And I think that, it keeps coming down to this idea, well, let's see if we can make somebody's life better, right? And which then, of course, makes somebody else's life better. And then maybe you hit two people. Because one of the things we discovered in the Institute of Purpose is if you want to have an influence on people regarding your purpose, it doesn't have to be 1 million people. It can just be one.
Mm.
And that's powerful too.
And
So,
in continuing the topic of older rappers having more of a message, there's a famous interview or something that Tupac had, and he said, um, I may not change the world, but I guarantee you I will spark the brain that will change the world. And that
yeah,
was his idea of everything that I'm saying. It might not change the world, but I'm going to keep saying things until I spark the brain of somebody who will change the world. And I think that's so special because he's understanding it's not about him. He's not saying I'm gonna change the world, I'm gonna make everybody, but he's saying I may not.
yeah,
He understand. I probably won't, but I guarantee you, I'm going to put in the work and do enough to where it's going to help somebody else help the
And now
rest.
you're a catalyst. And now you're a catalyst. I
Yeah.
mean, it goes back, same quote Margaret Mead said, right? Never think that a small group of committed people can't change the world, because indeed that's all that ever has.
Mm.
And it's the same exact thing. And that was, I don't know, when was that quote, 50, 80 years ago, she said that, something like that. So yeah, it's all very, it's interesting if you look at it from a perspective of what's the big picture. Get up in the morning, what's the big picture today?
Something that I want to also touch on is the biking that you were talking about
Yeah.
before we run out of time. Yes, elaborate on your purpose for what you, for why you're doing that, and how you plan on getting it done.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing in cycling. It's been going on since the 1800s. It seems like anybody should be able to attack this, but it takes a certain mentality to just get down and go that hard and that deep for an hour. And if I can do it, great. And if I can't, well, then I'll just keep trying. But, um, originally this was for me. This was just a me project. And it was kind of like, why do you climb a mountain? Well, you climb it because it's there. And that just seems so empty. So the first year or two that I was working on this hour attempt, and I own the hour record at the San Diego Velodrome in my age group. I own the course record for the World 6 Hour Time Trial Championships in my age group. So I've had some experience with this now and some history with it. And then one day I just woke up and I realized, like, I can train my ass off for 5 years to try to do this. And who does it serve?
Hmm.
And that conversation is the conversation that I was having at coffee with my friend with whom we started the Institute of Purpose. Because what I realized is I can take this crazy ass bike ride where I'm going to try to go 27.5 miles an hour on a track for an hour. And hopefully bring to people the idea that, you know, you can try anything. You can do anything. And I don't think it it has to be for, how am I saying this? You can do something that looks very self-serving and twist it 2 degrees, and all of a sudden it gives people some energy, some motivation, some drive. I mean, I'm going to go after this thing when I'm 70, right? Largest growing segment of the population in the United States is 85 plus.
Hmm.
10,000 people a day are turning 70 in the United States. When I was a kid, 70 was 2 feet in the grave.
Hmm.
I mean, it was old. And now I race bikes with people who are older than me. So if I can help anybody change their mindset about, oh, I'm just old, I'll sit on the couch. I'm just old, I don't have to do anything. I'm just old, it's going to hurt too much. I'm just like, it's not. You don't have to go to this extreme that I'm going to, but go 10% of the way. Get up in the morning, get on a bike, go for a swim, go have some fun, go throw some kettlebells around. It's like, go have some fun and just try stuff. It doesn't have to be successful. My coach said to me one day, right when I met him, that, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, this is freaking hard. And he was like, lots of people try to set records and don't succeed. And I was like, oh. And he didn't, I don't think he said that to make me feel worse about what I'm doing, but it was like, okay, I'm going to do the process with the goal of succeeding, because as I tell the story of the bike ride now, I tell it in terms of my purpose, with the idea of hopefully let's generate other people doing some stuff. And I haven't succeeded yet. If I succeed, I'll have a whole new story.
Hmm.
If I don't succeed, I'll have a whole new story. And that's kind of what I'm interested in on the bike ride. And it's a crazy thing. It's on a track. It's all about science and aerodynamics and fitness and nutrition. And I mean, it's a project. I work on this thing 15 hours a week. Um, and I spend money on it and I spend energy on it and I talk about it and Yeah, it's super cool. I did a little 9-minute video that I'll send you the link for if I haven't. You can drop that in the show notes about the ride and what it takes to do this and what it's like to what it looks like on the track and what it looks like to be coached and all this aerodynamic testing and all this other stuff. So um, it's my hope that people will rise to understanding that my purpose for doing this ride is uh, probably 50% self-serving because I really want to be successful at it, and 50%, you know, maybe I can trigger somebody else to try something crazy.
Well, that sounds absolutely crazy.
It's pretty crazy.
But I definitely commend you for doing it. And one, just at any age, if anybody decided to do that, but also at your age, my mom is actually in bad health every once in a while, and she's in her early 60s, and my dad the same way. And I'm just like, God. And my dad used to be in like really good shape. He was in the military and was running all the time, but now he doesn't as much. So it's a lot of times when I see people who are 60 plus who are in great shape, it now like makes sense to me. Like as I get older and like, my knee feels bad, my elbow feels bad or whatever. I'm like, I get it now. Like that's why we celebrate people who are of age and still active, is because it's not easy. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Everybody else would understand what it's like. So definitely commend you for doing it. But yep, it's time to wrap this up. Can you give me all your websites or links or anything, contact info so everybody can find out what you're doing and stay up to date with you?
Yeah, super simple. Instituteofpurpose.org. If you really want to drill down, if you're that interested in me, it's jeffseckendorf.com. And then if you're aging up and you're interested in coaching for fitness, I have my coaching business happens through a company called Coach Me Strong. That's coachmestrong.com. And so we take on clients who are like your parents, right? Used to be fit, maybe aren't, need some help. Fitness takes a village. And so, we offer a lot of that, me and the other coaches to really bring, a daily regime to people who are not used to it, but need a guide or want a guide and want some accountability and don't want to get injured while they do it. So,
Awesome. Well, thank
yeah.
you so much for coming on and spreading all your knowledge and wisdom of everything that you've been doing. Really admire, by the way, I definitely admire who you are and what you've done, because I'm basically doing the same things with my fitness journey and also photography, videography, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So thankful for you to spread your knowledge on everything you've done.
Oh, it's been great to have this conversation. I just love that it was, turned out completely organic. I had no idea where we were going to go, but you know, can't talk too much about fitness with me. It's just too much fun.
All right. Well, thank for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone.